Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
WESN.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Welcome, everybody. Let's just tell you what's happening around here at this time. The question is crime in Trinidad and Tobago, what to do about it. I wish to pursue from a standpoint of the government went for a state of emergency to address the crime problem, but the fact seems to be that that is not working. More crimes of all sorts seem to be taking place with no sense of fear or prevention by those involved. What is the reason for this? The sense of weakness from those in authority. What steps must be taken now? What may be driving it? What seems to be emboldening the criminals? Where do we go from here? What is left to be done? Has everything not been tried to this point? We're going to continue with states of emergency. My guest for this discussion on the program, Mr. Issa Mohammed. He's chairman of the Project 600 committee. We're going to start by welcoming him, but ask him, tell us a little bit of what Project 600. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you so much, Andy. A pleasant good morning to yourself and to all your viewers, and thanks for having me on the show. The Project 600 committee, we started in 2023, and the number 600 represented that the country was heading to a murder rate of 600 for the first time. And we organized the March Against Crime in Port of Spain in November of 2023. We followed it in 2024 with the Citizens Summit Against Crime and Violence, which took place in St. Joseph, where we spoke about the issues and famously called for a sort of all of society or stakeholder approach to dealing with crime. Now, between then and now, obviously, we've had a lot of changes in the country, and we're once again seeing a situation where this concern we have as the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, a concern we have that the situation is in fits and starts, some things better, some things worse. But overall, it seems that there is a continuation of the seriousness of the crime situation in Trinidad.
All right, let's go back to one of the things you said about a stakeholder approach. Let's talk about who the stakeholders are.
Well, that's to the heart of the problem, right? Because when it comes to national security, it's everyone's concern. So national security is not just something for the police service, it's not just something for the Ministry of National Security, but it rightfully involves the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. It involves the religious institutions, it involves the business associations, it involves private sector, it involves public sector, it involves sports, it involves everything working together to make Trinidad and Tobago a safe and secure place. And I think if we look at the main question here, which is we've had a state of emergency, which is something that we would have supported, is a state of emergency. We've had multiple states of emergency, and yes, they were successful in knocking down the murder rate, and that's good. No question about it, that's good. But despite the existence of the states of emergency, we are seeing now a resurgence. And we have to ask ourselves, is it that there are deeper issues that's driving the crime and violence that we are not taking into account when we attempt to address it? Is this problem perhaps larger and deeper, and perhaps there are aspects of it that are not even being considered as to be related to the problem of crime.
You think perhaps, but doesn't I'm not sure if the core what we're seeing evidence, but doesn't what we're seeing suggest that it is not?
Yeah, absolutely. Look at the recent situation in San Fernando with the police station, the firearms, very, very much in the public sphere right now. Yeah. So there are reports coming out in the media right now that the persons in charge in that area had very big question marks on their performance in managing the apparatus there, and that those issues were raised. And what we're seeing is that the human resource management system that is being used was insufficient to the task of making sure that the proper action was taken. This is one example in a high-profile case. Yet we can look at the entire police service. Any crime strategy that we devise needs to be implemented. You can come up with the best plans. You can come up with the states of emergency. You can come up with policing the borders more strongly. At the end of the day, these strategies need to be implemented by the officers on the ground. And when you look at the police stations, for example, ask yourself, the inspectors in the stations, how often are they rotated? Would it surprise you if I was to say that in a typical situation, you might find in 10 years that there are 20 different inspectors who pass through the system in that station in 10 years? How is anyone supposed to be able to get a handle on that community, build the intelligence, build the information, work with the community, work with the citizens who would supply the information, build that trust? How is that supposed to happen if there is such rapid turnover of officers and leadership throughout the situation? And so you ask yourself, well, why is there a policy to rotate officers so often? And the answer is because we don't trust the officers themselves. They say, well, it's easy to fall to corruption if you are in an area too long. The nefarious elements there will begin to know you, and they will begin to give you bribes and money. So because of that, we've implemented this rotation rule instead of doing what needed to be done, which is to hold people accountable. We have a problem with accountability in Trinidad. Now, if I were to say that the lack of accountability is driving the crime situation, would you take me seriously? And I'm saying that look at the situation in San Fernando right now. Because of a lack of accountability, we don't hold anybody accountable when they fail. And then we build all these rules whenever somebody does something wrong. And then, okay, this person is doing something wrong. And because of our nature, because of our culture, we don't want to bust their throat. So then we make a whole new rule book to say, oh, well, no, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do the other, and you can't do this. And so we rotate officers, and we increase requirements, and we tell them they have to meet this requirement, and that requirement, and this requirement, and the other. And right now, every inspector of every station in Trinidad is fighting so many bushfires that they don't have the mental space or capacity to deal with the actual business of crime fighting in their communities. And this is we put this on ourselves because we don't want to hold people to account. We don't want to hold people to account. So we make an entire convoluted system to try to get them to behave. When the correct strategy, the correct thing to do from day one is if somebody steps out of line, they need to be removed from their post. When was the last time there was a newspaper article? Now you got to forgive me if I get you correct me if I get something wrong. There's a newspaper article I remember reading that a man was falsely arrested by the police. He was thrown into jail for months. He was repeatedly raped. He took, when eventually the case was thrown out on a no case, they didn't even bother to make a case against him. He went to the courts of recourse and they awarded him a set of money.
Yes.
Now here's my question. What happened to those officers? And this comes to the heart of everything that's wrong with our country.
So your sense is that nothing would happen to those people who...
I'm not saying, I think
in terms of...
even if something happens in that situation because it's high profile, I think we sometimes do things when things are high profile. But I think for every one that's high profile, there are 10,000 that are low profile that we ignore. I saw a video being circulated with a police officer abusing a woman in Tobago. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah,
but the sheer amount of stories that we hear, and repeatedly it's the same thing, that persons are not held accountable. Now, I'm not saying that the police is full of bad, far from it. By and large, we have upstanding, hardworking officers, and I thoroughly believe that. But I think that the bad ones that are in there, and with certainty there are bad ones in there, the bad ones that are in there are not removed. They remain and they fester and they poison the entire organization. And in order to corral them, we create a set of rules that constrains everybody. And now, because of these rules we have created to constrain the bad actors instead of removing them, we have paralyzed the entire service. And they are so busy fighting fires and filling reports and meeting requirements that the actual business of policing is suffering. And I think this is not only a problem in the police service, this is a problem in all of our institutions across the board
in the society. But staying with the police a bit, there seemed to have been an attempt to address it by some means, in which you had the issue with the lady named Ulla Christopher. You had it with the former commissioner of police, the deputy commissioner. And to get to this point, because somebody or some group of people believed that was one of the ways to go to do the things inside and with the police service, but it hasn't been working.
I think the problem is bigger than the police service. I think the problem goes as far as the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. I think we have problems with our model of governance. I think we have problems with our industrial relations. And I think so long as we keep trying to solve problems in silos, that we will not be able to solve them because these problems are interconnected. And so we need an approach that looks holistically across the board at all the touch points that connect these institutions and how they impact and affect each other. We need to break out, because even from the perspective of policing and crime, policing is just enforcement.
Yeah.
But crime is not just to be tackled from the perspective of enforcement. There are driving forces that put pressure for criminal activity to increase. We speak about, they throw around words like socio-economic and these sorts of things. At the end of the day, look at the labor force participation rate in Trinidad. People are turning en masse from formal jobs to informal jobs. This is a really strong indicator that something is wrong in the society. When we look at people complaining about jobs, and more likely people complaining about opportunity to excel, there is a real problem. There are people who are graduating from university with university degrees and cannot get jobs in their fields. And there are people, of course, who can't access the universities in the first place. There is a big mismatch of everything that's going on. So, from the driving force of crime, when do we start to realize that this inequality in our society, that we are a society of haves and have-nots, this inequality in society is putting pressure. I remember Nasser Mustafa, a sociologist at UWI and a good friend of mine, and he would always say, I don't want to put him on the spot, but he would always tell me that it's not poverty that causes crime. And I think we know that. A lot of us in Trinidad grew up poor. Man, we are all poor together in this country. But when we were poor together, we did not have this problem. It's not poverty that causes crime. It's poverty alongside prosperity. Because when you are poor and your neighbor is poor, everybody poor together is fine. But when you are poor and your neighbor is vastly wealthy, that creates a pressure and it creates a sense of unfairness. So do we understand that even the education system, look at the SEA examination. Ask yourself, that SCA examination, are we institutionalizing inequality into our children from the time they're just barely over 10 years old?
You're asking, are we? But have we been doing?
Have we been?
Yeah.
And I am.
But it was always so, to some extent, and there was a time when less 11 plus children would pass the 11 plus exam to go to secondary school, and they had this.
But there is a point where it becomes, where it started was about merit, but where it has ended up has more to do with wealth than merit. And is that a discussion that we are ready to have? Who can afford lessons? Who could afford books? Who could afford transportation? Who gets a better meal to go to school with than somebody else?
But there wasn't a time in our coming up that it appeared to be, even where you had situations where, you know, the schools I went to in the area in the country that I'm from, Deep South, in some cases 2 or 3 children would pass the common entrance to go to secondary school, but now you have, you know, a different situation in which more children are being, because they, you know, over a period of time there were more secondary schools, whether junior sec, as the case may be, when it started and so on. So you have.
But there's a growing disparity with regards to how those who are successful, I don't even want, it's such a stupid word to say successful at the SCA. I hate saying that, because when you start off from the perspective of saying that 80% of your children have failed, that's horrible. And it sends a psychological message through the entire system. And I'm saying it's reflected in the labor force participation rate, where people are turning away from the traditional system, because I think there's a sense that this system can't work for us. The way it's set up doesn't work, and it doesn't work for us. Have we linked that to the crime and violence situation that is affecting everybody? Have we linked the ease of doing business? We say the businessmen complain about the ease of doing business, but for many people, being able to start a small business is an avenue out of poverty. And when we have problems with being able to do business easily, it's not just the big boys in the chamber that get affected, but it's the grassroots SMEs that also suffer and also get pushed down. Look at the procurement legislation. I spoke about creating a set of rules because we don't want to hold people accountable. So you have people misbehaving in spending public funds, but instead of dealing with them, because I don't recall anybody ever being dealt with. Instead of dealing with them, we create a whole set of rules and complicate and convolute the system. And now that is putting pressure on the ability of SMEs to provide an avenue for the lower levels of society to come out of poverty. What are we doing to ourselves? Because we don't want to face the actual problems head on.
And what are the actual, as you see it, the actual problems?
I think we have a serious problem with accountability in Trinidad and Tobago. I think we are a small society. Everybody grew up playing together and pitching marble together. And so we have like this institutionalized, I want to call it a old boys club. Yeah. There's the in people and the out people. And I think we have a problem holding each other to account. Nobody wants to do anything to their friend. And once you're inside and once you're connected with the right people, you are effectively untouchable in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think that there are some people for whom that works very well. And the majority of the people who I think are being unjustly done by that cultural practice.
And you're not seeing any signs of addressing what has to be addressed, or addressing it in the way that it has to be addressed?
Like I said, I think this is, we have to recognize now, I think at this point, because we've gone through the change in political process, right? So at this point, we need to realize that it's perhaps even bigger than that, right? Okay. And I think the very nature of how our politics have approached issues, not how any one politician has approached any particular issue. I'm saying the way our politics approaches issues in general needs to change, because we have inherited a system based on, and it's a colonial system, it's the British system, the Westminster system, but it's based on the idea of ministers running ministries, right? And so long as these ministers are running their ministry, they try to solve the problem within their area. But we need to recognize that that whole approach does not work, because the problems are interconnected. And it needs to break out from ministers, the Minister of National Security dealing with security. Do we understand that the education system is part of national security? The healthcare system is part of national security. The ease of doing business is part of national security. And food security is part of national security. Tourism, creating opportunities outside the oil and gas sector, is part of national security. Energy policy. People who say, well, energy policy have nothing to do with crime. Let me ask you a question. We are potentially looking at windfall gas supplies coming into Trinidad and Tobago when the Lauren Manatee field comes on stream. Good, fantastic, it'll be excellent to the economy. Now, we could choose to send that gas either to the LNG trains where it's simply exported, or we could choose to send it into Point Lisa's industrial estate where it feeds all the factories that produce refined products that are then exported. One of these avenues creates a lot more employment and overall economic activity in the country than the other. You understand? So if we look at energy policy from a national security perspective, can we not argue that it is more important to use that to create employment and activity in Trinidad and Tobago versus maybe making an extra few dollars on the LNG side? Now, if you look at it from an energy perspective only, you would say, well, this makes more economic sense. Sell it. But can we break out of that and say, no, let's look at this holistically and say, well, this energy policy has the potential to impact national security, and make those decisions based on cross-matrixed thinking. Matrix meaning connecting all the ministries together on lower levels, matrixed thinking rather than silo thinking.
To an extent, you might be aware that this kind of discussion is being held involving people in the government.
I really hope it is. And I am not going to say that I know that it isn't. I am a lay person. I'm a regular citizen looking at the situation in the country, and I am concerned. I can't say what's happening behind closed doors in the government. What I can say is that a state of emergency bringing down the murder rate gives us some breathing room, right? A state of emergency does not solve the problem because it eventually will have to be lifted. What it does, it gives us some breathing room to make the sort of changes that we need to make to address the problem on a fundamental level. I hope and I pray that the authorities understand that and that they are working assiduously to make those structural, deep-rooted changes in the wake of this breathing space that they've gotten by implementing the state of emergency. Because what I could say is, if that is not happening, if we're not making the fundamental changes, then the day that the state of emergency eventually has to come to an end, and that must happen at some time in the future, then we are potentially setting ourselves up for a tsunami of violence that could happen the day that the state of emergency is lifted and all of those people are put back on the streets.
But don't you think that we've gone there too often already, the imposition of states of emergency, whether it's across the entire society or as what emerged as a new way to do it?
It's troubling. It's troubling that we have switched from PNM to NAR to PNM to UNC to PNM to UNC to PNM, to People's Partnership, to PNM, to UNC. I think that's fair, right? It's distressing that despite repeatedly cycling the politics, we've really been unable since the 1990s to get a grasp on the situation. And we need to acknowledge that we have to change our thinking about how we go about doing it. So I do hope and I do pray that the authorities are listening. My perspective as a citizen who is raising his voice on the issue is to say, listen to us. We're speaking. Listen to what we're saying, because the citizens are perhaps the largest stakeholder. As we said, a stakeholder approach. The citizens are perhaps the largest stakeholder in national security. The purpose of national security is to keep us safe. So listen to what we are saying and make the changes that are required on a fundamental level. Break out of the simplistic close the borders, enact a state of emergency. That's fine in a short term, but criminals are inventive and they're highly motivated. They will find ways around those things unless we're able to deal with the root causes that is driving their need to participate in criminal activities. We need to nip it in the bud, and we need to give ourselves the capacity to do so. We need to deal with the capacity of the police service, the HR systems, the performance management, and remember, it's not just the police service, but it's all the institutions of government that need to work together to push the country forward.
Yeah, but you don't see that some attempts may have been made moving from Erla, Christopher to at this point, Guevara.
What shocked me about Erla is the fact that if you have a commissioner that's trying to do something, and then you have a person in the force who can arrest your commissioner of police, and that incident is so scandalous. What was the result of that whole incident? Where has that gone? I don't know. I can't say who was right, who was wrong. Commissioner of police was arrested. And for that sort of action to be taken, everything continued normal? Yeah. There are fundamental things that are wrong, and you see that word I said, accountability.
Yeah.
We need as a society to make friends with that word.
Yeah, because you have a situation in which you have a cabinet minister now who was on his way up in the police hierarchy, and certainly the view was that bringing somebody like that into the cabinet was addressing the issue, was finding a means to address the issue of crime.
But that's good and that's fine. But remember what I said about being able to address it in silos. So it's good that a minister could do what he can, or a commissioner can do what he or she can do within their purview. But I think even if we would, some people could argue they're not doing a good job, and people will have agendas as to why they say that. And some people will argue that they're doing a fantastic job, and they will have their agendas as to why they say that. What I am saying is, if they're doing a good job, let's assume they're doing a good job, overall, something is still wrong. So it means that even if you subscribe to the view that the commissioner is doing a good job, I like the commissioner's approach in certain matters, right? So you realize I have not said anything negative, I hope, about the commissioner or the Minister of National Security. Let it be that, let's assume they are trying the best they can in their portfolios. And then let us admit to ourselves that that is insufficient. So what I am suggesting is that the problem requires breaking out of their individual approaches There needs to be an overarching vision and strategy for the society as a whole. And without that, any efforts within the silos, I suspect, may be insufficient.
Because it probably it has to be heart-rending for people in the government now with the kind of mandate they got from the electorate and struggling to put an arrangement in place to bring down the crime rate, bring down the violence in society. That has to be a more difficult road to walk than one would have assumed with an administration that won the election in the way that they have.
Absolutely. Remember, they were in office for 5 years previously.
Yeah.
So they know intimately how the systems work, where the systems function and where the systems don't function. They are intimately aware of the operations of the system. Then they had 10 years to strategize how they were going to approach trying to fix the problems.
If they are back in,
if they're back in power, right?
And that happens.
So they have the experience of how it works. You have 10 years to come up with your ideas and your plans of how to fix it. Now you enter office and you're expected to go about implementing what you would have discussed for the past 10 years based on your 5-year experience of having sat in the seat, right? I think that was the expectation. And I believe that the government has an intrinsic interest in bringing crime down in Trinidad. I think it serves their politics. So I think they are highly motivated to bring crime down in Trinidad. So then it comes down not so much to their motivation or their will, it comes down now to their ability to do such. I'm not sure that they're lacking on intent, because we have seen the intent to make bold decisions in the interest of national security, and you can't take that away from them.
Yeah.
They have made some very bold decisions on the front of national security. But then what concerns me is, despite the change in politics, despite the intention by the government, we are still unable to deal with the challenges. And that tells me that there's a problem with how we are approaching the entire thing. And there are deeper underlying issues that perhaps go back to the Constitution, perhaps go back to our entire industrial relations environment, that are making it impossible for any strategy to work.
Because I'm not sure that this has happened before. If it has, it's probably not sufficiently, where you have a government that is made up of people from more areas in the society, whether it's the politicians, whether it's the sort of independent-minded people who decided to line up with the UNC in this round.
Right.
One got the sense that we were going to be heading in.
Yeah, I think so, and I think a lot of people are very frustrated. We feel frustrated. We feel very frustrated that the hope that we had that things might be different this time, we feel very frustrated that it hasn't materialized. And there's an argument to be made that, well, okay, it's only been 1 year, and we need to give it more time. And I accept that argument. That may very well be true. But as of today, I think this is how we feel. It's deeply frustrating, and I think the citizens are deeply frustrated. The question is, where do we find an avenue forward?
What do you think? How to go about it? Do you think that there's need for more consultations with wider cross sections of the population? And we've been there and done that already.
We've had consultations with sections of the population, and what we've not had were implementation of recommendations. And I think there are lots of recommendations made in lots of reports that are sitting on the shelves. And I think many of those recommendations have not been made. And I think we need to look back at some of those recommendations. There were recommendations not only to reform the police, or there was a manpower audit committee, I think that was Dale Saran, that did an entire manpower audit report on the police department. There was a Selwyn Ryan report. We've had reports, multiple reports, on how the Constitution itself needs to be adjusted to make some of these things practical. And I think these are conversations. How many of us tie constitutional reform to national security? How many of us tie electoral reform to national security? And what I am seeing here today is that all of these things are integrated into the same problem. And we are thinking about national security too narrowly, and we need to expand it to include all of society and all of the stakeholders.
Where does and how does the Project 600 committee sit and address some of these things? Because without having asked you before, my sense is that this is one of the other agencies from people in the private sector, people in the professional sector, trying to find ways through what we're going through to a point where we have a better society.
Well, we speak, and I think today and this interview is part and parcel of that. We can each do as best we can with what we're given. And if our ability is to raise our voices and speak, then we raise our voices and speak as best as we can and with the best intentions towards making Trinidad and Tobago a better place. Yeah. Will we be engaging in more civic-minded action? I think there's a reasonable expectation that with a change in dispensation, a certain amount of time be afforded to any new government to make inroads. And I think it's very reasonable for those who said, let's wait and see how things work out, and the strategies might very well work. And I subscribe to that. I'm willing to give anybody the chance and the rope needed to put their ideas in place, and let's see what the results are. But at this point, I am concerned that the way that the national security situation is being addressed is a bit shallow. And I'm raising a call that we need to look deeper, and we need to start addressing some of the fundamental things in the society. And that call will probably continue as time goes on.
Yeah, I think we have time.
I am not sure how much time. I am not sure how much time we really have. When you ask yourself the question, with the major criminal organizations locked up, well, a big chunk of the major criminal organizations locked up behind bars right now. Okay, here's a question you need to ask yourself. If the major criminal elements, all those who are known to police, are locked up right now, who is it that's committing these crimes?
Yeah.
It's not those guys. It's not those guys. So what's left? Johnny come lately who's rising up to fill the gaps? Or is it elements that are themselves protected from an SOE? What are the mechanisms by which criminal elements can be protected from an SOE?
Yeah.
And these are uncomfortable questions we need to ask ourselves. So yes, there is a time, there is ticking time that is going by. And if these elements embolden themselves and learn how to function and thrive under an SOE, which is a very distinct possibility, and I think we're seeing it now.
Yeah, because you have a situation in which this latest shoot-up on the Ladium Road. Like you have this one in the police station or was it the borough station in San Fernando? And
so they are learning. They are innovative. They are creative. They will evolve. When you change the system, they will find ways to adapt. And that is what we're seeing. And now imagine a situation where we have these new elements evolving and adapting, and then you are forced at some point down the road to take the entire old guard and release them back. It's a scary thought. It's a scary thought, the possibility of what could happen in a situation like that. And this is why I'm very concerned that we can't just be treating with this from an enforcement point of view, and the enforcement itself has problems, but we need not only to deal with how the police service operates, and there are problems there that needs to be dealt with, and the good officers, I think, really struggle in the environment in which they find themselves It is a difficult environment to operate in, and I think the good officers really struggle to keep up with what's going on based on the limitations around them. We need to find a way to ease up the situation for our good officers. We need to find a way to get rid of the bad ones and give them the capacity to do their jobs. So that's just enforcement. And outside of enforcement, we need to bring the rest of society on board.
Yeah, and by what means do you think that there has to be this rethink and this regathering of people to make that difference for us?
That's a question of leadership. It's directly and entirely a question of leadership. And it's hoping that the leadership of the country is self-aware enough to sit down and say, hold up, we need a rethink, because something is not working out as we expected it to work out. And to have that self-awareness, and then to question themselves, question their assumptions, and how they've gone about, not them, how we collectively as a society have gone about since independence trying to solve our problems. I think how we've done it has not worked for us. And so we need a fundamental rethink of how we go about doing things in general. So that's entirely a matter for the leadership of the country. And I think it's not just the government, it's also the opposition as the government in waiting. Where are the ideas for transformation in the thought process that could chart a way out of this for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? There needs to be a transformation of thought process. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So right now we are in the throes of insanity. So there needs to be a transformation of the thought process. And I think that falls to the leadership of the country, both in government and in opposition, to transform their thought process on how the country is managed. Because without national security, nothing else in the country is going to bear fruit. There's tourism and health and education, and none of that matters if you're going to get shot outside your door, your home going to get invaded, your wife's going to get raped.
But you have to continue to do that in a context of, or is that necessarily more states of emergency in order to?
You could keep the state of emergency running in perpetuity. I mean, I don't think that is I think that is neither practical nor desirable. Yeah. There has to be an end in mind. You have to begin with the end in mind. You have to, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? You have to chart a course from where you are now to where you want to be. And then you have to craft a plan that will get you from where you are here, your present location, to this future location where you want to find yourself. And you need to chart a course there. And I don't think Trinidad and Tobago being under a perpetual state of emergency is part of our future vision for Trinidad and Tobago. Certainly it's not a vision that I want.
Yeah. And to what extent agencies and organizations such as yours feel a sense of welcome by the ultimate decision makers, and people reached out to you and other highly civic-minded people to let's come together and find the solutions that are required to be found?
I have seen some reach out in some sectors, maybe in another one of my capacities, I could say in the private sector. You know, I've seen some outreach, but in terms of crime, for me personally, I haven't seen it. I look at people who are outspoken, civic-minded people who are outspoken, Pastor Dottin, yes. Look at David Mohammed. I'm looking at people who normally speak about the crime situation and who do it from a perspective of nation, rather than agenda. And I haven't seen anything, but it's not to say it's not happening. I don't know. I am just a citizen on the outside looking at what's going on in the country and feeling very concerned.
Yeah, to what extent the issue of constitutional reform might be necessary? Is there a need for that? And
I think
what do we want to reform?
Personally, I think it's critical. I think the Constitution needs to be changed, because I think a lot of the problems in our institutions stem from the Constitution that we have crafted for ourselves. I think the Constitution in many places puts too many restrictions, ties your hands behind your back, and makes it almost impossible for bad people to be removed from our organizations. And I think our constitution also gives us bad promotion habits, where good people are not promoted because spite. I mean, this is Trinidad and Tobago. Promotions are handled by spite, right? Is that a fair statement to make? Have enough of us seen this in the public service for us to admit that people are spitefully not promoted and that other people are promoted based on reasons other than performance, be it connections, links, political patronage? So the promotion system is all wrong. The inability to remove bad apples is all wrong. We can't for the life of us fire somebody who needs to be fired. I don't know, you ever hear about people getting fired? I don't hear about it. Only if you do something so crazy as to commit a criminal activity, then you might get arrested. It's easier to get arrested than to get fired. Is that a fair statement, Daddy? Is it a fair statement to say that in Trinidad and Tobago, it is easier to get arrested than to get fired?
Yeah.
Right? So all of this stems from constitutional arrangements. And I think that unless those fundamentals are dealt with, we're going to have a problem. I think the politics is also a problem, because politicians have to be motivated by trying to get into power. This is how politics work. But if you are stuck in a two-party system, well, I take a 5 years, you take a 10 years. I take a 5 years, you take a 10 years, and we just go down the road and everybody happy because everybody getting a turn. So I think the electoral system, we need to go back to the recommendations that were made, perhaps as far back as the Wooding Commission.
Wow,
that
you take this back, yes.
As far back as the Wooding Commission, that recommended an alternative electoral system for Trinidad and Tobago that would create a competitive environment where small parties could come into the fray, challenge the big ones, and the big ones would have to keep on their toes, or else they could get usurped by a smaller party. Now, this will add fresh ideas into the system and would elevate the national discussion. So yes, I think constitutional reform on a fundamental level has to be part and parcel of solving the problems of the country, and it all ends up at national security. Yeah,
because along the way between 1970 and now, and I'm saying 1970 because we are 50-something years after that, and we were supposed to. I was trying to reach somebody, Clyde Weatherhead, who wrote about what transpired then and where we are now from then. So a lot of those things, that how we should have been building the society and building governance coming from 1970 to now, a lot of that has been left at the wayside, and we're still struggling to get a society that is cohesive.
The root of these challenges we've had in building those institutions lies in that word you just said there, cohesive, because we were blessed with ethnic diversity in Trinidad and Tobago, and that has created, unfortunately, a type of fear in people.
Yeah.
And so
if them in, we out, and if we
and that fear of our own racism forms the foundation guiding principles to how much of our governance structure was built. The governance structure, in fact, I would say, was built primarily to answer us being afraid of our own racism, because we put things like job security at the top of our priorities. We are so concerned about job security, and this politician coming in and firing me, we are so concerned about job security that we have made it impossible to fire somebody. And that has come back now full circle, because the bad apples are able to weaponize that, what we with good intentions, to the best of our ability, put into our laws to protect our people. And I am saying that it was done with good intentions. And I am saying that they tried their best with what they had in the time. They tried their best to protect us. But those very laws that they made to protect us as a people, those laws are now being used by the bad apples in our institutions in order to keep themselves almost impossible for them to fix the fundamental problems. But what they can do is break those chains that bind them by going back to the Constitution.
Yeah. Are there elements of it, clauses in the Constitution, sections that you could point to and say, well, we have to deal with this?
Yeah, I would say we need to change the voting system from first past the post to proportional representation. I would say that we need to find a different model than the Service Commission model that we currently have. I think the Service Commission model doesn't work for us in the way we have implemented it. There are too many constitutional protections that prevent us from making changes in the public service, in the Service Commission model as a whole. Other countries have reformed their Service Commission models, and we could name England, New Zealand, the same Westminster system that we have, and they have done away with the sort of protections that we have kept. But remember, our model is like this to protect the citizens. It's not here for bad intent. It's here to protect the citizens.
Ostensibly, but
it's having unintended consequences. And so if we then change that, we have to somewhere else put more protections for the citizens, and this is where the electoral reform comes. So you change the electoral system to give the citizens more say, to put more accountability of the politicians in the hands of the citizens. So you put accountability for the public service in the hands of the politicians, but then you put accountability for the actions of the politicians in the hands of the citizens. So we balance the equation, but in a way that allows the society to function.
But you have a situation, at least my guess from the little I know and follow as to what happens with the government, that you have people in this administration or associated with the administration one way or the other who have different ideas about how probably a better system could be operated, but they can't get to do that. They have to follow the dictates of who calls the shots, and the sense that those things have to change, those things have to be changed, still somewhere down the road.
At the end of the day, it is for the leaders of the country to lead the country. And that is the reality and the fact of the matter. It's for the leaders of the country. So,
but with sufficient attention to ideas and
it's our job then in civil society to bring forward those ideas and to bring them forward as a conversation point. Because perhaps if the citizenry itself starts speaking about something, the politicians need to take notice, because these are the people who vote for them. So when we ourselves are comfortable to have some of these conversations, when we ourselves can break away from our own party politics to say, I am a red or I am a yellow. And when we could break from that and discuss together, we need to find a better way to move the country forward. And if such discussions could take root in the population, then the politicians may take notice.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because I'm in the process of getting together a position that there is, I discovered that there's an organization of women parliamentarians now, sort of having been given birth to and beginning to flower, and there are members of that team from either party, in the parliament now. So working on addressing how women address the issue, national development, how women address government, and how women address the parliament. So probably something will come out of that. It doesn't matter which party you belong to. If you, in this group here, we're talking about leadership and running of the country from a different perspective.
I don't think it's hopeless at all. I think that Trinidad and Tobago has been so blessed that multiple times we found ourselves in crisis, and multiple times we've been able to pull ourselves out of crisis. So I do not subscribe at all to the idea that groups like those working in the background could have impacts that could drive us out of the situation. And I think so long as the majority of us are working as best as we can with what we have to drive the country forward, it will move forward. Hopefully, we will have some fiscal space when the new energy projects come on stream. And it will give us an opportunity to do something good, an opportunity to do something fundamental. Groups like the one you are speaking about, advocating in the background for changes, and perhaps receptive ears from those who have their hands on the levels of power. That is a combination that could take this country from where it is today and really make it into the sweet nation that we all know it could be.
Thank you very much, Mr. Issa Mohammed.
Thank you very much, Andy.
Good to have you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anytime.
We'll see what happens as we go forward. This has been 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
WESN.